Well, I suspect.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's the sound of somebody being called on their bull crap right there.
Steve MacKinnon spoke with Vassy Kapelos yesterday, and not only did he admit that an election was coming very shortly, he also tried to say that criticizing the Liberal Party was somehow bad, and Vassy couldn't help herself but to laugh at his answers.
Let's take a look.
Here live in studio is Labour Minister Stephen MacKinnon. Hi, Minister. Good to see you.
It's good to be with you.
Thank you very much for making the time.
No problem.
How soon might that transition happen?
I don't know. Mr. Carney obviously is considering all of those scenarios now, meeting with senior officials, the Privy Council. It's a lot to take on all at once, and I know that he'll be doing that with great efficiency, and he has said himself that it won't take long.
Okay, right out of the gate, he's already lying. He absolutely knows when this is going to happen. He's in cabinet. They just met. Give me a break. You know when the transition's going to happen. It's speculated that they're going to actually formalize this over the next 2 days. Come on. You're in cabinet. You know better.
I mean, even we know when roughly the election is coming, and we're not in the Liberal Party.
Right. But this is just the transition for the Prime Minister. So
okay, fair enough. But it's going to come before the election. So if we're hearing that it could happen, well, we heard it could happen as soon as yesterday, which it didn't. But we're also hearing March 16th as a date. We're also hearing next week as a possibility. So the writ is going to drop very soon, and that transition needs to be done before that.
How soon do you anticipate an election campaign?
Well, the opposition parties have all said that they intend to take us down at the first opportunity. So that first opportunity would come on the Wednesday following the return of Parliament, the 26th of March. So the 26th of March sounds like the last date at which an election could be caused.
The last date at which an election could be caused.
Oops.
Last date.
That was an oops by Steve MacKinnon. Yeah, your Liberal PR people are going to be slapping you across the head after this. So, yeah. He's basically saying, well, if we don't call one, that's when it's going to happen. So,
and I know a lot of people have been concerned about Jagmeet Singh and his flip-flopping back and forth. Number one, it's going to be the Liberals who call the election. But even if it weren't, even if they don't, I don't think they'd want to leave it up to chance to give the opposition even an opportunity to call it. They can't trust Jagmeet Singh the same way we can't trust him. So I think the Liberals are going to be the ones to pull the plug, and they're going to do it very soon.
Well, and the other talking heads, even like Tom Mulcair, had said that similar to what we've been saying, why would the Liberals give the opposition parties a potential win right before an election? Why would they do that? And why would you go back to the House of Commons knowing that the opposition parties, all of them, are going to be hammering the Liberals on the fact that Mark Carney doesn't have a seat in the House? So,
and how long do you want that to go on for?
Right. So it doesn't make sense to go back to the House of Commons, considering the Liberals believe they're really high in the polls, and you're handing your political opponents a whole bunch of ammunition as well as a potential win in a non-confidence vote. It doesn't make sense for them to do that strategically. So this is why that an election being called by the Liberals is the worst kept secret in Ottawa right now. So even Steve MacKinnon seems to be unable to keep it.
Does your party, though, intend to trigger an election before that?
Well, is it really an issue of whether it's the Wednesday, the 26th,
I think
or
it is
3 or
for
4 days?
Canadians. I mean,
3 or 4 days prior to that? It seems pretty clear. Let's agree, Vassy, that an election seems like it's in the offing.
Okay, is your party ready for an election? I was looking at the number of candidates, for example, that were confirmed. I think it's about less than half of the total number needed. Is your party ready to go to a campaign as soon as, for example, next week?
There's been a lot of interest from candidates across the country. I personally have spoken to dozens of people who are either considering or are already in the process of filing their papers and so on to become candidates for the Liberal Party. So I don't anticipate that would be an issue.
So this is something we've actually been receiving a lot of emails about, where viewers are asking us, We've heard that you're talking about the writ being dropped very soon and that we're going to go to an election probably sometime in April. My riding doesn't have a candidate yet. What do I do? Who do I vote for? And the answer that we've been giving is they might not have a candidate right this second, but they absolutely will by the time you go to chuck that X on that ballot.
Well, and the other thing that Steve MacKinnon essentially said, yes, an election is in the cards. So he said all we need to know. They're going to be calling an election. And he even said, what difference does it make 3 or 4 days before? Well, it actually makes a big difference because you don't have to go to a confidence vote and then get a loss. So, yeah, he all but confirmed an election is going to be called some point within the next 2 weeks. So that's going to happen. And he also said, don't worry about it. As Tanya said, we'll be having candidates. And here's the thing. What the party leaders are able to do when a snap election is called, if they don't have these candidates in there, they can appoint them.
They sure can.
They don't have to go through this long process about, signing up memberships, validating candidates, going through those checks. They can just appoint them and you can go in an election very, very quickly. In
certain ridings where they don't have anybody, or maybe the candidates that have come forward are not suitable to the party, they will go out and they will find candidates. So do not worry. I can almost guarantee that the Conservatives, the Liberals, and NDP will be running a candidate in each and every single riding in this country.
Even if there were a campaign next week, you think the party could be ready for that?
Well, in that hypothetical scenario, in any hypothetical scenario, our job in a minority parliament is to be in more or less a permanent state of readiness, as it is for all parties. So we take that job very seriously. I know the Liberal Party of Canada takes that job very seriously, and so we'd be as ready as possible.
What do you say to Canadians who are right now consumed with the threat of tariffs in what they would mean for our economy and even more largely for our sovereignty, and your party's ability to govern through that?
Yep.
And also run a campaign?
Yes. Well, we have an incredibly experienced team, and that team just got an awful lot more experienced with the addition of our new leader. He's been, of course, battle-tested through the great financial crisis, through the Brexit crisis, through an entire career, really, of navigating some of the most tricky public policy, diplomacy-related issues in recent history right around the world. So,
the financial crisis, really?
Navigating it?
If
you mean sat in a boat and watched everybody else row and, he was basically a passenger while, the captain kind of steered the boat through. Sure, we'll agree.
Well, Stephen Harper recently I think it was in an article, was actually quite upset that Carney was taking credit for the late Mr. Flaherty's work on the 2008 financial crisis. So it seems like Carney really didn't do that much heavy lifting in Canada's financial crisis, but is taking all the credit for it. And that's where all of these jokes came from.
Well, and even the former Liberal Party under Paul Martin, they're annoyed at Carney as well, because one of the reasons why we were able to weather the crisis that we did was through some of the banking regulations that the former Liberal Party actually put in place. So he's taking credit not only for what the Conservatives did during the financial crisis, but what for the previous Liberals did under Martin when they put this in there. And then he took credit for balancing the budget under the Martin government, even though they did that like 6 years before he actually joined the Martin government. Like this, it's absolutely insane that he is taking credit for all of this stuff.
Hey, did you hear that Mark Carney invented the Bank of Canada in 1935?
Oh, well, there you go. It wouldn't surprise me, Bank of Carney Canada, I guess. But this is the thing. And then Brexit, there's been a lot of reports that they weren't impressed with his I will say his managing through that financial crisis in England when that happened. So, yeah, he brings a wealth of experience to politics that he himself says, I'm an outsider. I have no experience in politics. I'm not a politician. Which is it, guys? He either has experience or he doesn't.
Well, and this guy who's self-proclaimed, like, I'm not a politician, but gets the top political job in the country. It really doesn't make sense to me. And, I think I think the Liberals are living in this little bubble that they think Carney is going to be the one to save the party and keep them in power. But I think Canadians, by and large, see through this garbage. Canadians don't want a prime minister who just kind of swooped in and is here to save the Liberal Party and doesn't really care that much about Canada, and especially has no experience.
He and the team that ultimately will form the team that negotiates directly with the United States, I know will stay engaged right through whatever process may be in front of us.
I wanted to ask you about what you just spelled out, essentially that he is well suited, and I would not want to take away from his resume at all. The Conservatives, though, have argued that, in fact, he can't be trusted to defend Canada's interests against Donald Trump. And they used the example of Brookfield, Brookfield Asset Management, a company whose board he chaired that ultimately moved their headquarters from Canada to the United States. They utilize that example to kind of put in the window for Canadians their contention, which is that his actions don't match the rhetoric that he used throughout this campaign. How do you respond to that?
You know, Vassy, that's all they have is character assassination.
No. I mean, it helps, don't get me wrong, but that's not all they have.
But wait a minute. Steve MacKinnon, are you trying to imply that character, someone's integrity, has nothing to do with whether Canadians would want to vote for them?
Well, and that's the other thing. Like, he's just complaining about character assassination on Mark Carney, but that's all they do to Pierre Poilievre, because that's all they do have with Pierre Poilievre. Pierre Poilievre is a seasoned politician. He knows what he's doing. He's been leader of the opposition for the last 2 years, 2.5, I think. And he's going to be the one that leads this country back to prosperity.
Well, and the funny thing is they haven't been able to catch Pierre Poilievre in any lies.
No, of course not. I mean, we don't hear us making jokes about him inventing the pyramids or something ridiculous, right?
What they try to do is say, oh, well, he was at an event and there were some shady people there, so therefore Pierre Poilievre is shady. Like, that's what they have.
He was in the same room and breathed the same air as some people who believe something we don't agree with.
Right. So, you know, that's basically what they have. But for him to say, well, all they have is character assassination. Well, that's probably one of the most important things in politics, Mr. MacKinnon. And he's already been caught lying multiple times.
Carney, that is.
Right. Even before he was appointed the Prime Minister of Canada. So, dude, what are you talking about here?
Now, let's dissect that a little bit. I'm not sure that Carney was appointed the Prime Minister. I really do suspect that there was a lot of issues with the voting process. I think they were not prepared for the technology that they used. And I also think that there are a lot of Liberals who really do believe in their heart of hearts that Mark Carney is going to be the one to rescue this party. But we're looking to sit down with an individual that we know who is a Liberal Party member, and hopefully we'll get some of these answers for you guys.
Yes, and this individual actually worked directly for one of the previous Liberal Prime Ministers, and can give us some insight as to how this process actually works. So stay tuned for that.
Here you have a leader of the opposition who has spent 20 years in that building, never passed a single bill, has never been on a private sector payroll, has never had a job outside of politics, does not have the makings of a team that can match the kind of team that Mr. Carney can put in front of the United States. But most importantly, Mr. Carney will stand up for Canada, has done so all of his life. Mr. Poilievre shares the values of the very people we're negotiating against.
Okay, so Mark Carney has stood up for Canada all his life.
Do you know while he's been living in Europe?
And that's why he proclaimed to the World Economic Forum that he's a European.
And that's why he was shutting down our pipelines to make them in other areas of the world?
Right. And meanwhile, Pierre Poilievre, who has actually chosen to be a public servant his whole life, worked in Ottawa his whole adult career, he's the one that isn't standing up for Canada.
But you know what? This is how the Liberals have done it since the dawn of time. They take things that are true and they completely warp them to make you think something completely else.
Well, and then MacKinnon goes on to say, well, just look at the team that Mark Carney is going to be able to put in front of Donald Trump. Okay, so the same team that was under Trudeau, that's the team that's going to be in front of Donald Trump. Yippee-ki-yay.
Well, and that's the exact thing that I think Canadians really need to focus on and really need to keep in mind. He might shuffle his cabinet, he might pull people in and out, but I mean, if you change the captain of the ship, is the ship really going to function that much better if you've got the same helmsman, you've got the same people down, in the belly of the ship?
This is basically, okay, so the captain was running the ship. So the admiral that was telling the captain how to run the ship is now running the ship. This is where we're at.
That's a better analogy.
So, this is really where we're at. Now, you contrast the Liberal cabinet with Pierre's team. I'm sorry. You got Michael Chong, you have Melissa Lantzman, you have Larry Brock, you have Michael Cooper, Garnet Jennis, Michael Barrett, Andrew Are you kidding me?
And so many other amazing MPs.
Yeah, there's dozens of them.
You heard Michelle Ferrari that one time in the House of Commons. She stood up and she said that the women in this caucus are respected because we had to work to get here.
Yeah, we earned our spot on merit,
right,
which is why there's no question on why they're there, which is why they garner so much respect.
And why they work so hard.
And why did Donald Trump say he's not MAGA?
Well, I suspect there were calls made perhaps to have him say that. I don't know.
Do you know that?
I have no idea about that. But what I do know is...
Ladies and gentlemen, that's the sound of somebody being called on their bull crap right there.
Well, I suspect...
maybe they called Donald Trump and asked him to tweet out that Pierre wasn't a Trump guy or a MAGA guy. Do you know that? Well, I don't.
No, but this is that whole mind trap, and it's not Liberals that do it only. All of us do, and it's very hard to catch yourself doing it and stop doing it. But we have to remember that what we think is not necessarily what the truth is. We have to find evidence of something happening, and that's what the truth is. Just because you believe it doesn't mean it really happened.
Well, and this is the problem, right? The Liberals are trying to say, well, Pierre Poilievre, he's just like Trump. And then Vassy says, but Trump said he's not just like Trump. Trump said he's not a MAGA guy. Well, they probably called him and asked him to say that.
Well, because they know that somebody in Pierre's caucus is good friends with Trump's vice president. So in their minds, they're going, oh, well, that must be the connection. Maybe a call was made and they asked him to do this. Having zero evidence whatsoever. And again, as I said, that's that trap we have to fall into. Just because we think something happened or that it could have happened doesn't mean that it has.
That when people close their eyes and listen to Mr. Poilievre, what they hear is the intonation, the words, the grievance, the criticism that they hear when they hear MAGA Republicans speak. And I think it brings back sort of bad impressions and bad memories to Canadians. Every time that they hear those kinds of expressions and that kind of right-wing ideology expressed on the political scene in this country.
Why does it make you MAGA, though, to highlight, for example, that Mark Carney didn't tell the truth immediately when a reporter asked him about his involvement in that decision? And I look, again, I know what the company has said about the move, that the jobs stay and the taxes are still paid in Canada, but he didn't answer truthfully the first time. Why is it MAGA to flag that if you're the opposition? Isn't that their
character job? Assassination is what they do. These cute...
Is MacKinnon not right in the middle of launching a character assassination on Poilievre?
Well, not only that, the Minister of Labor is right in the middle of literally insulting tens of millions of Americans that voted for Donald Trump. That's what he's also doing. And he's also trying to insult millions of Canadians that are going to be voting for Pierre Poilievre. But everybody, Pierre Poilievre is the one that is dividing Canadians.
Oh, of course. How could I forget?
Like, this is an absolute joke. And I love that they keep putting MacKinnon out there. I really do.
I don't know why.
Because I don't know. He's a clown.
Do you know, I would say that there must be better cabinet ministers to throw out there, but maybe there's not.
I don't know. According to MacKinnon, this is a superstar team here. And remember, if this is the best they have, including in the backbenchers on the Liberals, oof.
The little names and nicknames and all these sort of whiny complaints that right-wing Republicans make. That's what they're hearing here.
But you're literally saying that for criticizing your party, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives are MAGA. Isn't that character assassination?
No, what?
You notice how Vassy was like almost couldn't contain herself. She started laughing like MacKinnon, do you not understand the words that are coming out of your mouth? Like that's what she's saying. Like, okay, so any criticisms levied against the Liberal Party, it's MAGA to say that our homes have doubled in cost. It's MAGA to say that 2 million people are going to a food bank. It's MAGA to say we have tent cities all over the place. It's MAGA to say that we can't afford groceries. It's MAGA to say that we can't afford energy. We can't afford anything in this country. But those are whiny complaints and criticisms. This is the Liberal Party, folks.
It's like that scene in The Simpsons where Homer and Marge are talking, and she's, I can't even remember what she says to him, but his response is, "But it's cute when I do it."
Right. This is the dissonance that's going on right here. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve MacKinnon.
What I'm saying is character assassination is the kind of thing that you see coming from the United States, and they've really imported and maybe even perfected that tactic. Mr. Carney's track record is one of creating wealth for this country. He has participated in building large enterprises in Canada that are among the world's best, and at the same time serving this country, whether it be in the Department of Finance or in the Bank of Canada,
then why didn't he tell the truth that way?
Serving the United Nations in terms of climate change, or in serving the global banking system that was dealing with its possible collapse following the global financial crisis. Mr. Carney has been battle tested, and I can't think of anyone with a better track record of serving Canadians and serving the public interest and accomplishments that Mr. Carney has.
Then why didn't he tell the truth when he was asked that question?
I can think of somebody better. His name is Pierre Poilievre.
Well, I just imagine, just unpack what Steve MacKinnon just said. He's saying that Mark Carney has a track record of, and I quote, creating wealth for this country, end quote. Really? I didn't know that the hundreds of billions of dollars that Brookfield Asset Management actually manages, I didn't know I'm entitled to part of that. I didn't know.
I suppose you could argue that, it creates jobs and yada, yada, yada. But then they moved it to the States. And Vassy had said, well, the taxes stay in Canada and the jobs stay in Canada. Then why move it to the States? There's something gained and lost by moving it to the States. The other thing we lost was a pipeline, right? Why were the Liberals shutting down pipelines in our own country? And then Mark Carney was investing in pipelines where? In Brazil, was it?
Yeah, South America. And they also invest in coal down the States. And when called on that and the hypocrisy of the carbon tax and everything else, he says, well, let me just stand up a little higher and talk down to you and explain the economy to you.
But Canadians need energy too, and we don't want to have to live in poverty to get it.
But this is the thing. He's literally saying that, well, we need one of the global elitists. That's what qualifies as the best qualified person to run Canada. You need somebody who makes himself rich and his shareholders rich. In Steve MacKinnon's mind, and this is important, folks, in Steve MacKinnon's mind, a guy who makes himself rich and his shareholders rich, that is what is important to the Liberal Party. Well, I guess he's going to fit in just nice and snugly, isn't he? Because that's what the Liberals did when it came to the SDTC scandal.
Again, I think the Liberals, not only the politicians, but the people within the party are stuck in this little bubble that they think Carney is going to be the man, like a Superman almost, to come in, swoop in, and just fix everything. And, he'll be the next prime minister and he'll win the election and et cetera, et cetera. And they really don't know the temperature of the rest of the country. They have no idea about the people living in poverty. They have no idea about the Canadians who are tired of losing our rights. I think they're going to be in for a very rude awakening come election day. And I know we're going to work our hardest with our local EDAs to make as much of an impact as we can. And I really think that the Liberals are going to be very shocked once those ballots are counted.